Mother, tell your children not to walk my way.
Alright, yes, you read the title correctly. Yes, you read the little introduction correctly. This is me defending Vince Russo, the undefendable. I know, you guys all think he's the Antichrist of pro wrestling, just like John Cena. But I'm here to defend him on some things. First of all, let's keep in mind, Vince Russo is, in fact, probably the creative mind behind the Attitude Era. I know a lot of you will say, oh, he just stole stuff from ECW. I write a lot of stuff. I really do. That's where my education is in writing. I'm going to sit here and tell you that's how you write. You steal stuff, even if you don't realize you're doing it. You know how you become a better writer? You read stuff. You know how you become a better screenwriter? You watch stuff. And you do end up stealing stuff. Look at, here's a great, let me think of a great example. There's great examples of guys just stealing stuff. Quentin Tarantino. Quentin Tarantino, one of the things that a lot of people, critics, gripe at him about is the fact that, and love about him at the same time. They gripe and then love about him. They say, you know, really he's doing this, but it doesn't matter because at least somebody's doing it. He steals stuff. He steals ideas. He steals shots. He steals, you know, concepts. He steals lots of stuff, and he's like this just like words or not of just movie knowledge. So you know, you're always doing that, and the fact that yes, he did steal stuff from ECW. So what? He took that, which was definitely a niche product. I love ECW, but it was definitely a niche product. I think it could have been a successful niche product, but it was a niche product. And he took that product and he blew it up so that it could be consumed by the masses. Okay? That's not an easy thing to do. And the fact he was able to do that is pretty impressive. Now, the reason why I think he was able to do that is he had Vince McMahon over him to tell him when he was going too far to say, let's pull it back a little bit. And let's not go with that idea. And maybe that's a little too much. And you had guys like Jim Ross and Cornette also to kind of say, well, wait a minute, you know, that's getting too far away from the wrestling. Let's, you know, bring it back a little bit. The fact you had all of that kept Vince Russo in check, kept all of his ideas in check, kept Ed Ferrero's ideas in check too, so that basically you had the Attitude Era as we know it. Well, him and Vince McMahon, of course, had a falling out. He ended up going to WCW, which was a big deal. People need to realize that Vince Russo was seen as pretty much a McMahon in Vince McMahon's eyes. He was part of that inner sanctum that very, very few guys have ever been in the WWF or WWE. And went to WCW and was given complete control over WCW. There was a huge mistake. And also Vince Russo had lots of other things to deal with, such as what he was left with after Eric Bischoff left. He had this big, huge political turmoil in WCW, which was one of the huge, huge problems with WCW because the foundation of WCW had been eroded away. It wasn't there, and he was basically going to have to try to work a miracle. And he did have some pretty good ideas. I mean, the concepts he had that he was trying to put over in WCW weren't bad. The execution of those and the fact that he took some of them far too far and the fact that he was doing far too many swerves was the problem. It wasn't necessarily the actual ideas. It was the progression of those ideas. You can put the title on Arquette, okay? The problem is how do you put the title on Arquette? Do you put it in a way which is believable? I.e., you know, you have a run-in and Arquette wins the title and then Arquette jobs to somebody the next week. Is it similar to when Vince McMahon won the title? Is it similar to when Vince McMahon won the ECW title, which pissed a lot of people off, but it was believable? And if it's believable, then I think people would have gone for it a lot better. The problem is it wasn't booked believable, and he tried to go over the top with it, and going over the top with it just didn't work. And other things like that. The fact that you could definitely see elements of there to what would have worked, but it was just all taken far too out of context, far too far, and he was basically just trying to outdo the WWE instead of just trying to put on a good product. Then they brought Eric Bischoff back, and the whole idea was, well, maybe if we have both of them working together, it will work. And if you go back and you look when they were both pretty much working together at the start, it looked very promising. The problem is they started butting heads over who to push, who not to push. They both agreed that it needed to be young guys, but they couldn't agree which young guys, and the whole, you know, political crap started all over again. And basically you were left with what Eric Bischoff had before, and WCW ended up falling for reasons that were not their own, and lots of reasons why WCW fell. But to put the blame on Vince Russo is a huge, huge mistake. It was not completely Vince Russo's fault. Vince Russo, you know, when he joined WCW, WCW was in had a lot of problems already that Vince Russo just couldn't fix. And I think if him and Eric Bischoff would have been able to work better together, I think you would definitely have seen WCW maybe have done a little better. I don't know if it still would have been sold. It probably would have, because by all account, Time Warner didn't want any part of, or AOL Time Warner didn't want any part of WCW by that point. So there you go. And he went back to WWE, of course. And of course, then he went to TNA the first time, back when TNA was doing the 2-hour pay-per-views. And if you go back and look at those, and I would recommend anybody going back and look at this, there were good storylines, particularly in the upper card, where you didn't really have a lot of good, necessarily wrestlers, but they were basically just putting guys out there that had names. There were good storylines. It was good booking. Vince Russo came up with a lot of good ideas. This Sports Entertainment Extreme angle was very good. It was an invasion angle like the NWO, and NWO was not the first invasion angle, folks. It wasn't, but it was an invasion angle, and it worked. And Vince Russo came up with a very good idea, and it was booked very well. And the storylines then were sometimes over the top, but they were over the top in a way that worked. And one of the reasons why I think that was because he had Jeff Jarrett and Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett's dad, basically over him saying, "That's a little too far, let's not go that far," and lots of other things like that, where it worked and it made sense, and you could definitely see where things were going. And you know, things weren't crazy. You know, it really worked, and it wasn't too far entertainment. It was still based pretty much on the wrestling. Well, then Vince Russo left. Mike Tenay and D'Amore joined the booking team, and the wrestling got really good. The storylines weren't all that great, but they didn't need to be great because the wrestling was so good. And you know, and so forth and so forth. Well, about 4 months, yes folks, about 4 months before Vince Russo ever came back to TNA, you could see the product changing. You could see it going more towards the sports entertainment angles. And the problem was it wasn't very good. It really wasn't. You could see that, man, if they go this way, it's not going to be good. Jeff Jarrett decided to do this. Dixie Tartar decided to do this, go to this more entertainment, sports entertainment type thing. And really, it just, as soon as they started doing it, it just really didn't work. And then, of course, Vince Russo was brought in. But Dutch Mantell and Jeff Jarrett were already booking stuff before then. Then they brought in Vince Russo, and nothing really changed after that. I know a lot of people go, "Oh, well, look, you know, you can't sit there and tell me that, because look at the angles. They're doing Vince Russo angles." Yes, they're doing Vince Russo angles. They were doing Vince Russo angles before Vince Russo ever came back. Okay? The fact that everybody and their brother keeps reporting that up until just recently, Vince Russo had about this much power in TNA. Okay? They were doing Vince Russo, and the thing is that they announced that some of the angles that people said, "Oh, that's a Vince Russo angle," wasn't a Vince Russo angle. That it was a Dutch Mantell angle. And that Dutch Mantell was trying to do the same thing that Vince Russo was. Now, recently, Vince Russo has been given a little bit more power. And the last couple of impacts, which have actually been good, have all been Vince Russo impacts. Just keep that in mind, folks. That Vince Russo has, the impacts over the last couple of weeks have been good. And Vince Russo has been responsible for that, for a large degree. And 2 weeks ago, the impacts from a couple of weeks ago, a lot of people said were very good before Jeff Jarrett and Dutch Mantell went in and re-edited them. And then they became a little more confusing. But before that, they said they were very good. This last impact was said to be that's the rumor at least, a Russo impact as well. It was really good. I like this last impact. Folks, Vince Russo is not the problem. It's Jeff Jarrett. It's Dutch Mantell. We know this. Matt Bentley told us this. When Matt Bentley's interview, did you hear Vince Russo talk about even once? No. You heard Dutch Mantell. You heard Jeff Jarrett. Vince Russo is a scapegoat for those two guys, so that he'll take all the heat, and they get off scot-free. Keep that in mind, boys and girls. Vince Russo is not the Antichrist. He's actually come up with some good ideas. He's capable of taking on good ideas. He just can't be the all-encompassing. He can't be just the power. He's got to have somebody over him to tell him no. When that's the case, it works. See the Attitude Era. I'm out.